Imagine two powerful images that define two great eras in the history of Northern Europe. The first is the brilliant gold leaf-covered Trundholm Sun Chariot, symbolizing the cosmological and artistic achievements of the Nordic Bronze Age. And the second image is the Roman eagle, the Aquila, which embodies a distant but incredibly influential force that, centuries later, radically changed the North. Hello everyone, you are on the channel What Was That? And today we will find out how Scandinavia transformed from a sophisticated Bronze Age society into a dynamic, militarized machine. Let's start with the fact that the Nordic Bronze Age is not just a period when bronze products became widespread. Social inequality emerged, and elites separated, but also the name of the culture itself, given by archaeologists to the unique way of life that existed in Scandinavia from 1750 BCE. The core of the culture was Denmark, southern Sweden, Scania, and Schleswig-Holstein. The broader cultural sphere encompassed southern Norway, central Sweden, and the southwestern coast of Finland. Cultural unity was manifested in common styles of metalwork, burial rituals, and cosmologies. However, this culture did not arise in isolation. Its roots go back to the late Neolithic, where two key cultures laid its foundation. The battle-axe culture, a local variant of the corded ware culture, brought a pastoral economy and new social structures. Subsequently, the bell-beaker culture, which spread along the Atlantic coast, brought advanced maritime technologies and early knowledge of metallurgy, which became crucial for future trade. And the real catalyst that transformed these elements into the full-fledged Nordic Bronze Age culture was the influence of the powerful Unitas culture from Central Europe. It was this culture that became the main source not only of metallurgical knowledge, but also of the raw materials themselves, copper and tin, which marked the beginning of the Golden Age of the North. Later, in the final stage of the Nordic Bronze Age, a new ideological impulse came again from the south. The practice of cremation and burying ashes in urns was borrowed from the Urnfield culture, which may indicate prolonged cultural contacts and profound changes in the worldview of the Scandinavians themselves. Thus, the Nordic Bronze Age, though unique in its essence, was in constant contact with continental Europe, creatively reinterpreting external influences and creating its own unique world based on them. At the heart of this culture lay a fundamental paradox. Scandinavia was one of the richest regions in Europe for bronze artifacts, yet it was almost completely devoid of copper and tin, the raw materials necessary for the production of bronze itself. The societies of the Nordic Bronze Age were entirely dependent on external sources of these metals, and this dependence inextricably linked Scandinavia to a vast trade network that stretched from the Mediterranean all the way to the Baltic. Isotopic analysis of metal artifacts, conducted by researchers such as Helle van Kilde, Heide Nørgaard, and Ernst Pernicka, has revealed the dynamic nature of the metal trade and its chronological changes. For instance, in the initial stage, Scandinavia relied on Central German intermediaries from the Unetish culture, who supplied copper with a high impurity content from the Austrian Inn River Valley and the territory of modern-day Slovakia. This metal was supplemented by British metal with a high tin content, which enabled early local production of tin bronze. After the collapse of the Unetice culture around 1300 BCE, a strategic shift occurred. Scandinavian elites established direct access to the Carpathian Basin, obtaining chalcopyrite from the territory of modern-day Slovakia and the Eastern Alps. And after the cessation of British imports, a new shift occurred towards North Italian copper. This new route connected the Nordic Bronze Age culture with the South German tumulus culture and the first Transalpine amber route. In exchange for vital metals, Scandinavia's main export was amber, the gold of the North. This fossilized resin, abundant on the coasts of the Baltic and North Seas, was highly valued in the Mediterranean. The Amber Road, a network of routes that carried this commodity south, directly linked Scandinavia with the economic sphere of powerful civilizations such as the Mycenaean civilization. This trade was so significant that Baltic amber has been found even in the tombs of Egyptian pharaohs, including Tutankhamun. These extensive trade networks were not impersonal flows of goods, but were maintained through complex human relationships, including strategic marriages and the physical movement of high-status individuals over long distances. The archaeological case of the Egtved Girl is a vivid personal example of how this network functioned. Analysis of strontium isotopes in her teeth, hair, and nails prove that she was born and raised in the Black Forest region of southern modern-day Germany. She moved to Jutland and even traveled back home for a time before her death. Her burial, with a unique corded skirt and a bronze belt plate, indicates her high status. The most likely explanation for such a long-distance move of a high-status young woman is a political marriage, arranged to strengthen an alliance between a southern chief who controlled the supply of metals and a northern chief who likely controlled the amber trade. This changes our understanding of the Bronze Age economy. It was not just trade in goods, but a diplomatic and social network, where kinship ties and the exchange of people were as important as the exchange of metals themselves. Extensive trade networks would have been impossible without advanced shipbuilding. There is evidence of complex plank-built boats, sewn with bast fiber, which would have been strong enough for open-sea voyages. This technology, which appeared around 2000 BCE, was a necessary prerequisite for the metal trade. The analysis is based on thousands of images of ships in rock art and on the amazing find of the Hjortspring boat, which, although later than the Bronze Age, is still considered a reflection of a long tradition of this construction style. Recent research by Bengtsson, Arterson, and Abelin puts forward a revolutionary hypothesis about the use of sails in the Nordic Bronze Age culture. Evidence from rock carvings and holes for masts and stone ship settings suggests the possible existence of large sailing vessels. This discovery, if ever confirmed, could radically change our understanding of the range and efficiency of sea voyages of that era. As for society, it became more differentiated compared to previous eras. At its core were chiefdoms, political entities where power was concentrated in the hands of powerful clans or individual chiefs. At the top of the social pyramid was a military aristocracy, whose wealth and power were based on control over trade, especially in metals and amber. Then came the warriors themselves and the commoners, farmers, pastoralists, artisans, and sailors. They lived in small settlements and engaged in agriculture and animal husbandry. Regarding the warriors, the concept of brutal beauty by Danish archaeologist Helle Vankilde is very interesting here. Vankilde's theory is based on the analysis of material culture, particularly weapons, jewelry, ritual objects, and burial complexes. She argues that Bronze Age weapons, such as swords, daggers, axes, and shields, were often not just functional tools for killing, but also works of art. They were decorated with complex patterns, inlays, and symbolic images. According to Vankilde, this sophistication was not intended to hide the brutal nature of the weapon, but on the contrary, to emphasize and glorify it, making violence attractive and worthy of respect. Vankilde's concept also touches on how violence was integrated into social and ritual life. Demonstrative burials of warriors with weapons, battle scenes in rock art, and ritual duels were ways not only to honor the dead, but also to affirm warrior values. The aesthetic design of these practices made violence a part of the sacred and social order. Speaking of religion, the central element of the Nordic Bronze Age religion was the worship of the sun and its cyclical journey across the sky. This belief is most vividly embodied in the Trundholm's Sun Chariot, a bronze and gold sculpture depicting a divine horse pulling a gilded solar disk on spoked wheels. The Swedish archaeologist Anders Sandgren, in his work tracing ancient Scandinavian cosmology, points out that the idea of a horse pulling the sun finds its continuation in Norse mythology. The horses Skinfaxi and Hrimfaxi pull the chariots of the god of day, Dagr, and the giant of night, Not, across the sky. Accordingly, this is a direct mythological continuation of the cosmology of the Nordic Bronze Age culture. This solar cosmology is also further reflected in thousands of petroglyphs, especially concentrated in places like Tanum in Sweden. The dominant motifs are ships, symbolizing the vessel that carries the sun, and spirals, personifying the eternal movement of the sun and life-giving energy. The key symbols of the Nordic Bronze Age religion, the ship and the sun, were not accidental. They were a direct reflection of the two fundamental realities that defined their existence: the daily and annual solar cycle, crucial for agricultural life and sea voyages. Their religion was not an abstract mythology, but a practical and deeply rooted worldview that sanctified the very activities that were necessary for their survival and prosperity. The journey of the sun was a divine archetype for their own perilous journeys, turning every trade mission into a reenactment of a cosmic principle. The transitional period from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age, which began around the 6th century BCE, was marked by a convergence of crises. A significant deterioration of the climate led to colder and wetter conditions, which negatively affected agriculture. At the same time, growing conflicts between the Hallstatt and Latin cultures in Central Europe destabilized and eventually severed the trade routes that had supplied Scandinavia with bronze for over a millennium. The cessation of metal imports caused a systemic collapse. The power of the elite, based on control over bronze, was undermined. This is indicated by archaeological data from burials of that time, which show a significantly reduced number of rich metal artifacts. It was at this time, from the ashes of the late Bronze Age crisis, and on the basis of new local iron metallurgy, that a new cultural formation emerged in northern Germany and southern Scandinavia, which became decisive for the future history of Europe. The Jastorf culture appeared. This archaeological culture, which existed from about the 6th century BCE, is considered by many scholars to be the cradle of the Proto-Germanic tribes. This culture was not the result of conquest or sudden migration. It evolved organically from the local traditions of the Nordic Bronze Age and represents a gradual transition as a society cut off from the import of metals needed for bronze production adapted to new realities by relying on local iron. The development of bloomery furnaces allowed for its small-scale local production. And this change had profound social consequences. While bronze production was a specialized craft controlled by elites with access to foreign trade, iron smelting could be done at a more local, even domestic level. This decentralized access to high-quality metal for tools and weapons radically changed the existing power structure. The widespread use of iron tools, plowshares, sickles, axes, revolutionized agriculture, making it more intensive and productive. And this, in turn, led to population growth and the development of larger, more organized rural settlements, which differed from the scattered farms of the Bronze Age. The Jastorf culture is not followed by one specific archaeological culture with a new name. Instead, the Jastorf culture itself and its related groups gradually evolved into what historians and archaeologists call the cultures of the Roman Iron Age. This period lasted from the beginning of our era and was characterized by a profound transformation of the society of the Jastorf culture's descendants under the enormous influence of the new superpower to the south, the Roman Empire. If the Jastorf culture was a period of internal consolidation and adaptation after the collapse of the Bronze Age, the Roman Iron Age became an era of new globalization, wealth, and wars. Contacts with the continent resumed with incredible force. The Amber Road was working again, but now the main buyer was the Roman Empire. In exchange for northern goods, amber, fur, leather, and slaves, a stream of Roman luxury items flowed into Scandinavia. Archaeologists find thousands of Roman coins, exquisite silver and glass vessels, bronze statuettes, and jewelry. These items were not just goods, but powerful symbols of status. Also, unlike the relatively modest society of the Jastorf culture, where burials contained almost no weapons, the Roman Iron Age saw the rise of a military elite once again. This was facilitated by two factors. First was service in the Roman army. Many Scandinavian warriors, particularly from the territory of modern Denmark, served as mercenaries or in auxiliary troops, the auxilia. They returned home not only with pay, but also with invaluable experience of Roman tactics, organization, and discipline. They brought with them Roman weapons and equipment, which became models for local blacksmiths. And second was the competition for wealth. Control over trade routes and the distribution of Roman goods led to fierce competition among local chiefs. Power now depended not so much on lineage as on military strength and the ability to attract and maintain a retinue of loyal warriors. Society became much more hierarchical. Instead of scattered settlements, central places appeared, large fortified centers where chiefs lived, religious rituals took place, and artisans worked. One could say that these were the first proto-cities that controlled significant territories. It was during this period, as a direct result of contact with the literate Roman world, that Scandinavia's first own writing system appeared, the runic alphabet, the Elder Futhark. The early runes were an adaptation of the Latin or other Italic alphabets for carving on wood and stone. Thus, the culture that replaced the Jastorf was its direct descendant, but radically changed. It was a dynamic, highly militarized, and stratified society, deeply integrated into the economic and political orbit of Rome. It was in this crucible of the Roman Iron Age that all the key elements were forged that would later define the next great era, the Viking Age.